All right, everyone. So we are going to go ahead and get started. We might have a couple more people joining us, but welcome to the second webinar in our series. We are so excited to have you here. Last week went better than we anticipated, and we're just really excited to continue doing these. So these sessions are brought to you in tandem with Mental Health Awareness Month. Oh, and I think we have a little bit of feedback, so I'll skip ahead to housekeeping for a second. If we could get everyone to mute themselves and turn off their cameras, that would be really helpful for this. Awesome. So these sessions are brought to you in tandem with Mental Health Awareness Month and our Let's Talk About Mental Health campaign. And we are putting them on as the Northwestern Community Services Board Prevention Department. And last week's theme for the Talking About Mental Health campaign was Finding the Positive, Talking About Good. So today we'll be talking about finding the positives and reframing negative thoughts. A few housekeeping things. Like I said, if we can all stay muted and videos off during this, that would be helpful. And we are going to have some question and answer throughout this presentation and at the end. So if you are having any questions while Dr. Campbell is speaking, please feel free to send them in the chat. You can send them directly to Amber Ramey. So don't send them to everyone, send them to Amber directly. Just pull up the chat and you'll be able to select her name and send them. And then we will get to those questions throughout the presentation. All right, so we'll just hop into this. Like I said, we're so excited to have Dr. Kendra Campbell here with us. Dr. Kendra Campbell is a board-certified holistic psychiatrist who received her medical and psychiatric training in New York City. She completed fellowships in public and emergency psychiatry at Columbia University. She's the founder of a local nonprofit organization, Range Psychiatry, whose mission is to transform our world by discovering root causes for mental health symptoms and healing them with holistic mind-body interventions. Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Are we ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready to go. So I will start us off with a question. Like I said, we're talking about negative thoughts, mindfulness. So let's start just by talking about how negative thoughts impact daily life.
Absolutely. So I have a couple of slides that I'm going to share. Hopefully this will work. Actually, you know what? 1 second here. I closed my PowerPoint. Give me just a second. Okay, view. All right. Let's see. There we go. Share, and I'm almost there. Slideshow, play from start. Okay, here we go. Move this down. All right, can everybody see those slides? You can see that? Okay, Casey? Okay, yes. Great. Okay, so negative thoughts. Well, first off, every single one of us, I would say, has negative thoughts, probably every single day of our lives. That's how common this is. So, so having these negative thoughts, they can impact every single aspect of your life, right? So that would include how you feel about yourself, how you feel and see other people, whether or not you're able to get your activities of daily living completed. Meaning, like, if you're sitting there having tons of negative thoughts, it may interfere with your ability to, get your dishes done or take care of your kids or go to work or all these different things that you need to do. And then it definitely can affect our self-esteem and our self-worth, right? If you're constantly thinking, I'm a horrible person, I'm not good enough, all these thoughts are just kind of flooding you all the time, you're not going to feel very good about yourself. In addition, they can definitely, and I see this a lot, interfere with our ability to sleep. I would guess that probably, I know this happens to me all the time, and I would bet pretty much everyone here has had nights where you have like negative thoughts, anxious thoughts, depressed thoughts that just get stuck in your head like on autoplay, and you just can't get them out, and to the point where you just can't sleep. It's super, super common for that to happen. And when we have these negative thoughts all day long, we can start to feel really anxious, right? All the time. Our anxiety goes through the roof. We can even start to feel quite depressed because we're constantly ruminating, about things that maybe we did wrong or things in the past. And it can get so bad to the point where you can even have thoughts that you don't want to live anymore. Those could even, can progress to get that bad. I just wanted to point out one thing on this slide where it says negative emotions. I kind of wanted that actually to say negative thoughts. I just couldn't find a slide that showed that. But basically, I just want to quickly say that, so thoughts and emotions are closely related, right? You can have a thought which can then make you feel an emotion, or you can actually have an emotion which can then cause you to have a thought, although usually it goes thoughts to emotion. So for example, if the thought is, I'm not worthy or something like that, I'm not worthy of that, then the emotion can be sadness, right? Or if the thought is, I really should have done this for somebody and I didn't do it. I feel, that's what I should have done. That's the thought. And then if you see here, guilt would be the emotion. So yeah, that's, negative thoughts, we have them and they absolutely can affect our daily life.
So, if they're affecting our daily life and they're leading to emotions that can be tough to feel, what are some ways to reframe some of those thought patterns?
All right, so I have let's see here. Oops, 1 second. There we go. Actually, let me see here. I meant to go back one. Let's see here. Okay, I think your question was how to reframe negative thoughts, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I got a slide on that. Okay, all right. So first I just want to kind of talk about the phrase cognitive reframing. Okay, well, that's something that we use like, in psychology and psychiatry. And what does that mean? So the premise behind cognitive reframing is that it's not really the things that happen in life that drive our emotions and our behaviors. It's the way that we think about those things. And if you stop and think about that, that's really powerful, because, it's really easy to feel like, I feel horrible because all these horrible things have happened and this happened to me and that happened to me. And, the pandemic is happening and, something happened with my mother, something happened with my child. And that's why I feel sad. And that's why I'm having these thoughts. But the reality is that how we perceive them and how we think about these things, these kinds of things that happen in our life, is actually what causes us to feel the sadness or do certain things. So we do have some control over how things kind of impact us. And that's kind of what cognitive reframing is about. So the idea is you take the thought and kind of, I like to say, turn it upside down. Like, how can you take a thought and just look at it from a completely different perspective, like turn it around completely. It's the common example is like the glass is half full or empty, right? You can see a glass of water and you can definitely see it and say, yeah, okay, it's half empty. But you could also just kind of look at it a different way and say, oh no, it's actually half full. So it's the exact same glass. Nothing has changed about the glass. It's just how you're perceiving it and how you're thinking about it. And I know this sounds crazy, but believe it or not, I can guarantee you that give me any thought, no matter how horrible it is or anything that's happened, and there is a way to reframe it and to think about it from a different perspective so that it doesn't have like that negative impact. It is possible. It is challenging. It is difficult. It is not an easy thing to do. And I think in many ways, we go our whole life without kind of learning how to do these things. So especially, kids are actually better at doing this. Because they don't have as much practice thinking negative thoughts as adults do. We've been doing this for so many years, it becomes ingrained in us, right? It's just like a reflex. Something happens and it just turns into a negative thought. But all reflexes, all things that we do with practice, and it does take practice, you can learn how to reframe it. You can learn how to change it. It is possible. It just takes a lot of practice and repetition.
So, as we practice and we think creatively for how to reframe, that sounds like it might be easier for adults than it is for children, or maybe that, kids would need a little bit of assistance with that. Can you speak to that a little bit, how we can help younger people reframe?
Absolutely. And actually, let me go back one slide. There we go. And yeah, so this one I'm saying, what about if a child is, constantly talking negatively about themselves? What kinds of things can we do as parents and adults? So the first and really honestly, the most important thing is when they say something is to just listen to what they're saying closely and empathize. I know this sounds crazy, but I can tell you as a psychiatrist, as moms and as just human beings, when someone says something to us, like I stubbed my toe, or I had a bad day or something. Our natural instinct, we actually call it the righting reflex. Our natural instinct is to fix, right? So it's like, oh, okay, you stubbed your toe. Okay, we gotta get your Band-Aid. We gotta do something. Oh, you don't feel good today? Okay, let's figure out some way to make you feel better. Like, we just want to help people, right? But what we forget to do before helping people is great, but before you get to that point, the first thing to do is just listen and just empathize. Oh, wow, you hurt your toe. That must be really painful. How does that feel? Like that, tell me more about your hurt toe. Like, what does it mean for that toe to be hurt like that? Just to listen, and holding what we call like an accepting, non-judgmental, and non-fixing space. That's how I like to call it. So not judging them, we're just accepting them and just holding that kind of space. Honestly, if you do nothing else, that's probably the most powerful thing that you can do. And it's actually a hard thing to do, like I said, because it's not necessarily our reflex. We don't think about that. But a lot of times when people are saying something, they just want you to say, oh, okay, I hear you. And so that can be really, really easy and really powerful. And then another thing with children, especially, that's really important is, as we all know, they are always watching us. They are always constantly observing us, even when we don't think they are. They're observing us. They're watching what we say. They're watching what we do. They're thinking about it, and they're learning. So, more than anything, just being a good example for them. Like, we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are going to be able to do this all the time. But is what much as you can, just to be cognizant of the things that you're saying or doing. Because if you're constantly being judgmental of yourself, if you're constantly saying critical things about yourself, saying that things, negative things about yourself, your kids hear that and they pick up on it, and they might start doing it themselves. If you're constantly saying how much you love yourself and you think that you're an important person and you take care of yourself and you respect yourself, that's going to get transferred onto the kids, and they're going to pick it up, and it's going to be more likely that they're going to do that. So that's really important. Another thing is just, we talk about positive reinforcement. So if you see that they are saying something positive, they should get a whole big, like, hooray, good job. Like, if they're saying, oh, I did well today, then you want to really encourage that. You want to say, yes, you did so well. And look, you noticed how well you did. And that's great. And that's awesome. And just kind of lots of praise, lots of positive reinforcement when you see that they are saying things like that. You want to point that out. A lot of times we don't mean to do this, but we accidentally focus on the negative, right? Someone can do all these different positive things and we just don't say anything. And then the one negative thing they do, we jump on them, right? And especially we can do that, I think, as parents. It's just easy to do. We forget. But what that message that sends to our kids is all the good stuff that they didn't matter. And only the bad stuff that they said or did mattered. And now they're getting the attention, even though it's negative attention, they're getting attention when they say the things that you don't want them to say, right? Or when they do the things that you don't want them to do, that's when you're paying attention to them. So the message that they get through that is, well, I guess I should be bad and say bad things because then I'm going to get more attention that way. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. And then lastly, just like to be curious. I kind of touched on this in the beginning, but, ask them questions. Like if they say, I feel horrible about myself. I can't play soccer. I'm worthless. I'll never be a good soccer player, something like that. Okay, so tell me more about that. Why do you feel like you're not a good soccer player? What does it mean to be a good soccer player? How do you feel when you say you're not going to be a good soccer player? And just kind of like exploring it with them, just kind of from a curious stance, like, okay, just tell me more about that. Let's talk about that. And in doing that, you can a lot of times kind of help to reframe things for them. There's an example I really love to use with kids, which is, let's say you're walking down, the hallway at school, even though this is not, I guess, relevant anymore, but when back when there were hallways that you walked down, and then you pass this other kid, and this other kid gives you a face, right? Looks at you weird. Now you think, you stop and think, oh, I wonder what that means. Let's say that person actually was just having a horrible day, right? Horrible day themselves. And when you looked at them, they weren't even actually looking at you. They didn't actually even care about you. They were just as busy in their own little world having a horrible day. But they looked at you and you thought, oh, wow, they don't like me. They hate me. They judge me. You could think all of these things. when really none of that was true, right? It's just you were misperceiving what was going on in their mind. So a lot of times we think that we know what other people are thinking, and we make these assumptions, and a lot of times we're just completely wrong. So it's important to understand and remember that we're wrong a lot. We're not perfect, and just because you perceive something some way doesn't mean that that's reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love your point about curiosity. I think that's a great way to help children understand reframing and negative thoughts. But I also think it's really helpful as adults to be curious about our own perceptions and where these things are coming from. So I love that.
Absolutely. And that goes back to if you're doing that too, and they see that, they're going to pick up on that. Oh, that's a thing to do,
Yeah. So Dr. Campbell, I know mindfulness is something that we talk about a lot with when we're talking about negative thoughts or reframing, but I think it's kind of a big concept, and I'm wondering if you can kind of break it down and define it for us.
Absolutely. And let me go, whoops, I keep using my wrong button to do this. 1 second. Okay. So mindfulness is in the past couple of years, especially, has become really popular. I use it myself quite a bit. I use it with my family, and I use it with a lot of my patients. I think it's maybe one of the most powerful and important and easy. That's the other thing. It's not hard at all to do once you know how to do it. Ways of you can use mindfulness for anything. So mindfulness is good for when you have a negative emotion. It's good for, again, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed, if you're having whatever type of issue you're having, you're just having a bad day. Learning how to bring some mindfulness into your life can be really helpful. And it's easy. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need tools. You can just do it with your everything that you have. So that's the cool thing about it. So there's a lot of different definitions of mindfulness. I thought this one was a pretty decent one, which is mindfulness is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. So the idea is you're focused here and now on this present moment, nothing else, nowhere else, this present moment, and you're doing it from the stance of that non-judgmental, accepting, compassion. That's important too, right? So you're in the moment and you're coming at it from compassion, curiosity, all those things, right? The example I really like to use, and I think this because it makes a lot of sense, is if you're feeling depressed, let's say you're having depressive thoughts. So depressive thoughts like, I really messed up that whatever test, or I really should have helped that person out and I really didn't do a very good job. So that's an example of your mind focusing on things that happened in the past, right? It's kind of like you're just overplaying, this broken record of, well, I messed that up. I did this wrong. I'm a horrible person. All those things are kind of depressive thoughts. I think I need to let somebody in. Let me just make sure that I need to do that. No, okay, I don't. I thought there was somebody to let in. Okay, sorry. Then the sound threw me off. I apologize. Okay. So that's your mind being in the past. Now, if you're having anxious thoughts, anxiety is your mind being in the future. So I have this exam that I have to study for. Oh gosh, I have to do this tomorrow. I have to do this the next day. That's anxiety, right? So that's your mind living in the future. So if your mind is busy living in the past and the future, by definition, you are never living in the present moment. And the present moment is where all the joy is, where all the fun is, where all the pleasure is. That's there. So if we can learn to move our brains, instead of move them out of the past and out of the future and back into right now, what's happening at this exact moment? How are you this moment? That's mindfulness. And that's where you can find joy and happiness, and all these wonderful things are right here in this present moment. And let me just go ahead and go back to my slide. Sorry about that. Okay. Yes. Sorry.
Great. So I think, again, I would love for you to speak to how this can be used both for adults and for children, especially while we're all home right now.
Absolutely. And I think I have, yes. Okay. So here are a little bit of slides, some easy ways to do this. And these are literally adults or children, either way, it's basically the same. And that's why I love it. It's super easy to do. So one thing is, we were talking about having these negative thoughts, right? just one thing that I wanted to comment about how mindfulness works is a little bit different, right? So probably all of our lives, whenever we had a negative thought, like I'm feeling sad today, or I hate myself, right? We were probably told by people, you know, maybe our parents or teachers or, you know, people who are well-meaning, well, just think positive. Just get the thought out of your head. Like that's what, just get it out. Just don't think that. Think something positive. Do you think that works? It doesn't. It actually doesn't work very well. So we know from research and from everything else that the harder you try to force a thought out of your mind, usually your mind has this kind of self-defense mechanism, the harder that thought will stay in your head. It's really, if you fight it, it will stay. That's one thing that we know. So from mindfulness, what mindfulness teaches is that instead of trying to fight the thought, and this is kind of a radical idea, you actually invite the thought in. So I like to use the example of, so you have your mind, right? And the annoying thought is like this neighbor, or you can even, if you have a toddler works well, banging at the door, right? Like, mommy, like, let me in, I want to talk, whatever, right? So one thing you can do is just like keep the door shut and be like, no, get out, you can't come in. That doesn't work very well. The other thing you can do is open the door and say, hey, come on in, bad thought. Hey, have a seat on the couch. Here's a drink. Would you like a snack? So the idea is, instead of fighting with the thought, you literally just invite the thought in and say, okay. And then you approach the thought with curiosity. So instead of trying to get rid of the thought, you say, interesting. I wonder if that's interesting. I'm thinking right now that I'm a horrible person. That's an interesting thing. That's interesting. Okay. And what that does, I know it sounds counterintuitive. It may sound a little weird because this isn't what we, would do usually, is that the idea is that by being accepting towards the thought, being curious, being non-judgmental about the thought. So you don't beat yourself up that you had the thought. You say, hey, that's cool. That's interesting. I'm having this thought. By doing that, the thought actually becomes less powerful. And believe it or not, and I can tell you this works. It works. It will go away. The thought will literally just kind of go away, which is kind of crazy, but not fighting it actually makes it go away. Mm-hmm. So that's one easy thing that we can all do. So the next time you catch yourself, any thought, any negative thought, anxious thought, whatever it is, try just, instead of trying to get rid of it, try to be curious about it. Try to like think about it from, kind of a little bit of a distance, instead of letting it just kind of overwhelm you, and see if that works. I use this technique a lot. I've used this technique with lots of people, and I can guarantee you it does work. It does take practice just like everything else, because this isn't our natural instinct, but it definitely does work. And then another really easy thing that I like to do, there's this, if you see the picture here in the bottom right hand of the screen, it's just called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So the easiest way to get out of the to get out of the past and the future, right? To come into the present moment. The present moment is our 5 senses, right? If you use our 5 senses, it will by definition bring you into the present moment, because the present moment is where you're seeing, breathing, all these things, right? So one way to do it is you say, okay, hearing. Actually, this one is a little bit different from what I usually use. Well, it doesn't matter which sense you use, but I usually use sight as being number 5, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Let's say 5 things that you can hear. So you just sit there and focus. I think this works better. You can do this anywhere. You can do this in your bedroom. You can do this, at work. You can do this outside. You can do this in the middle of a party. You can do it anytime, because nobody will know that you're doing it. But I like to do it outside, but you can do it anywhere. So like, what are 5 things that I hear right now? Well, I hear the bird chirping. I hear the train going by. I hear kids crying, whatever it is. Just focus on the sound, not thinking about what it means or anything like that, just listening to it. And the same thing with what you see. Just come up with like 4 things that you see. I see that tree over there. I see a bird. I see a squirrel, etc. And then the rest of your senses. So like 3 things that you touch. Right now I could feel like the chair under me, I could feel the weight of my chest going up and down, etc. And then 2 things that you can smell. Right now I can smell some flowers outside, etc. And then 1 thing that you can taste. The idea is that if you focus on your 5 senses fully, it will bring you into the present moment. It has to. It's impossible to not be in the present moment without like being in your senses, right? And then I put go out by yourself also with your children in practice. So this is something really you can do for fun, right? This is free. It takes,
Mhm.
5 minutes. You can literally just say, hey, kids, let's just go outside. And you can say, hey, tell me, what are 5 things that you see right now? You know what I mean? What are 4 things that you smell right now? Like, this is just an easy game that you can play with kids. And if you do it every day and you keep practicing it, it's like I said, it becomes kind of like second nature. And then another thing I actually didn't put on this slide, but I probably should have put on the slide, is another really easy way to do it is to focus on your breath. So breathing is a really fascinating thing. It's one of the only things in our body that happens automatically without us thinking, but we also can control it ourselves. So there's really like nothing else that has both of those things, right? Like it's always going, we're always breathing without thinking about it, but we also can stop and we have control over it. So just by paying attention to your breath, literally do nothing else, just think about your breath. Think about the sensation, the feeling of like your chest filling up, and then the sensation of your chest going down, going out. You could start to count your breaths or count how long you're inhaling or how long you're exhaling. And then there's all kinds of more fancy things that you can do. Like, if you Google breathing techniques, you'll probably find like 100,000 different options. There's tons of different ones out there. One simple one that I like to do is to just place my hand on my belly. And then just do like, you do 3 in, 3 seconds into your nose, 1, 2, 3, hold it for 2 seconds, hold 1, 2, and then 4 seconds out your mouth. And while you're doing that, you rest your hand on your belly and you just kind of feel the feeling of your belly going up and down. Again, the idea is all these things are simple, easy to do, and they bring you back out of land of depressive thoughts and anxiety thoughts just to the simple act of breathing, or just to the simple thing of a smell of a flower. And that's where all the joy and the fun, and that's where life is, right? That's where life is happening right here in this moment. It's not happening in the past and the future. It's happening right now, but we miss it because we're so busy being in the past and the future. So those are some easy ways to do it.
Yeah. So I know that, as you're saying, mindfulness is a really powerful way to kind of recenter ourselves and be in the present. And I'm wondering, we're in May, we're talking about mental health awareness. How does mindfulness benefit or help us reach mental wellness and practice habits that are really healthy for our mental wellness?
Very good question. And I think, let me just advance here. Yes. Okay. So does mindfulness help with mental health? Yes, it helps a lot. In fact, there's thousands of studies that have been done using mindfulness everywhere, like in public school systems, in jails, in mental hospitals, using them with cancer patients, using them with people end of life, kids with ADHD, like you name it. There are thousands of studies that have been done, which every single one of them show it works. It works, and it's easy, and it's cheap, and it's just simple, right? It's not something that's so complex. It's really kind of an easy thing to do, and it really, really works. They've looked at all different types of mental health outcomes, but it helps with depression. It helps with anxiety. You name it, any kind of symptom that you can be having, any kind of diagnosis, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. That's the great thing about it too. It's not just for depression. It's also for people who have schizophrenia or any different type of diagnosis. It doesn't matter. It will be helpful, which is kind of cool. And also on top of that, the really nice thing is it actually helps with physical health as well. So they've shown that people who do mindfulness can have lower blood pressure. They can lose weight. They have less heart disease, all different kinds of things. So not only are you going to feel better mentally, but it literally will improve your physical health. And there's not a lot of things that we can do that are free and easy to do and cheap, that can improve our, physical and mental health, and something that we can do pretty simply. And this is one of them. So, and like I said before too, I use it for myself. I use it for my family, and I've used it with many, many patients. So I can tell you that, that it works beyond any doubt. It definitely works.
That's awesome. Before I ask my next question, I just want to remind everyone that if you are having any questions, if any of this is bringing up something that you want an answer to, feel free to send that over to Amber Ramey, and we will get those questions answered in a few minutes. So Dr. Campbell, reframing negative thoughts, practicing mindfulness, these are all really helpful tools for us at home or in the workplace, I mean, wherever we need to be utilizing them. But I'm wondering if you can speak to when someone should seek help for negative thoughts, when maybe the mindfulness tools and reframing don't feel like they're enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And 1 second here. Okay. So I think it's a really important question, because we can try to do these things and maybe they'll help a little bit, but maybe they won't help a lot. And sometimes when we're struggling, when we're really struggling, we can know in our minds that we need to be doing these things, like, right. But that's one part, that's step one. But then step two is actually being able to successfully do it. And sometimes when we're struggling or feeling overwhelmed, it's really hard to do that, and it's hard to implement the things, even if we know that they're going to be helpful. So I would say that anytime the negative thoughts are getting to the point, a good way to think about it is if they're getting to the point where they're interfering with your life, right? I think at any point you want to start using these interventions. But if you're getting to the point where, especially if you've tried these interventions and it's not working and you're not getting things done that you need to get done, for example, you can't get to work. Like you're so anxious or you're so depressed, you're having so many thoughts that you can't even make it out the door or make it to the Zoom or whatever to do your work. That's kind of a red flag right there. If it's impacting your ability to care for yourself, so like you're so having all these negative thoughts all the time, and you're not getting out of bed, and you're not eating, and you're not showering, you're not getting the things done that you need to do. That's a big deal when it starts affecting that. And then if you're a parent or if you're caring for somebody else and you notice that you're not really able to care for them like you want to be able to, like you're not able to care for your kids like you want to, or anybody else that that you would be caring for, that would also be kind of like a red flag that this is getting kind of bad. And then of course, if the negative thoughts, there's a whole range of negative thoughts from, just simple kind of like, oh, I'm having a bad day kind of negative thoughts, all the way to like really kind of dangerous negative thoughts that can happen sometimes. So, they can become to the point, like I kind of mentioned before, where you actually say you feel so overwhelmed by the negative thoughts that you think that you might not want to live anymore. It may even get to the point where you've even actually thinking about it, like you're actually having real thoughts about suicide, or even real thoughts about harming somebody else because you're just so angry or something like that. So those last two, I guess, when it gets to that point, that's definitely what I would call kind of more like an emergency. So, for the first things I talked about impacting your ability to function, I would say that means that probably you need to do something. You need to take a step, talk to somebody, and I can talk about what that would look like. But definitely if you get to the point where you're having like suicidal thoughts, or you're really having thoughts like you wanted to hurt somebody else, that's kind of more urgent, emergent, and you really need to kind of talk to somebody and get some help right away for that.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to kind of know to be able to recognize when these at-home tools are not helping as much as we'd like them to be helping, especially when we're in trying times like these.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's hard. And honestly, it's a gray line too. It's a fuzzy line. It's not like one second you are and then 1 second you're not, it's kind of a fuzzy area. But, honestly, a good rule of thumb too is if you think you're struggling and you think you're having a hard time, you are. And you need to ask for help. You know what I mean? Like if you're having that thought, then you need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're starting to get some questions from our participants. So I think I'll dive into those if you're ready for them, Dr. Campbell. All right, so this first one reads, what practical steps can both individuals and societies take to break patterns of intergenerational trauma, i.e. fear of vulnerability, anger, violence, etc.? Are there resources you can share?
That is a really great and really challenging question for me to answer. So yes, so intergenerational trauma, I could probably talk about that for the next, like 6 years or something. So it's a really great question, by the way, because this is the case, right? So we're always, thinking about things on the kind of like microcosm. So I'm just talking about, how do you help your child over here? But really, when you think about it, the picture is much bigger than that. It's not just about this 5-year-old's negative thoughts. It's about what happened to his mother when she was 5-year-old, and what happened to their mother, and the society that they live in, and racism and poverty, and like all these other things that are huge. So it's kind of like we're, in a way, thinking about putting like a little Band-Aid on things when actually the problem is much larger. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, I guess I have to say, I don't have a really good answer to the question, which is it's challenging. I think just as much as we can, it can be helpful to focus on the smaller scale, like, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe not, and try for the most part not to get overwhelmed by, well, what about all this other stuff that's going on? So just kind of actually maybe keeping it simple and saying, okay, well, let me at least just kind of like right now help, this 5-year-old kid get past whatever this kind of episode is that they're having. But then maybe when you're not in that mode and you have time, you can actually think about, okay, what are some other ways to like heal these other things that are going on? And I would say things like that would be things like, therapy, really, like therapy for any of the people that are involved. Therapy is probably one of the most important tools when it comes to the healing of trauma. And of course, there's all different types of therapy, and there are very specific types of therapy that help with trauma, by the way, like EMDR or what's called prolonged exposure therapy. So they're very specific things that can be done. And many times in my experience, it's very fascinating because, I'll have one person who is my patient, right? And let's say that's a 10-year-old boy or something. But the reality is that's not my only patient. My patient is their mother and their teacher and their grandmother and their sister and their dog and everybody else, because it's really hard to just treat that one person when really everything that is going on around them is what's kind of affecting them. So as much as I can, I try to, for example, like bring it, do family therapy or, get grandma to go to therapy or whatever, trying to kind of like treat and help anybody else that may be involved. And yeah, that's tricky because guess what? Grandma might not want to go to therapy, or this person says, I don't have a problem. What do you mean? So, there's the ideal, what we would love to do. And then there's kind of the reality of what we can. But I think that we just kind of try to do the best that we can. As far as specific resources, I'll have to think on that. I definitely could think of that, and then maybe I can send them out kind of later. But I'm sure I could think of some. Just off the top of my head, the best book ever, actually have it right here. The best book that I've ever read actually on trauma is The Body Keeps the Score. I highly recommend this book. It's excellent. So that's one resource, just kind of like reading that book and kind of understanding it. And then, yeah, there's a lot of other resources. It's interesting. Just, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but there was a big study called the ACEs study. And basically what they found is they looked at like childhood trauma and all different types of trauma too, not just, physical abuse, but also neglect, and also just, having a family with a lot of fighting, all these different kinds of variables. And they looked at how these people then did long term. Not surprisingly, these people ended up having depression and anxiety and things like that. Not too shocking. Okay, they had trauma. But what we found out is they also had higher rates of heart disease, diabetes, obesity. Like all of these medical things are more common in people who have been traumatized. So pretty fascinating kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's an excellent question. I don't know if I have the perfect answer to it, but I will think on it some more, and then also try to send some resources out other resources maybe that could be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a big question, but I think you're right. This work does start at home, and it starts in our own circles, and it starts with doing the work ourselves and helping the people we love cope and reframe and practice mindfulness.
Yeah. And actually, I just want to echo what you said, Casey, as being maybe the most important thing that I didn't really emphasize, is that literally, probably beyond everything else, the most important thing you can do to help your mother and your kids and everybody else in your life is to help yourself. Honestly, like if you're working on your own issues, if you're working on improving yourself, I can guarantee you that has an impact on everybody around you, a positive impact, and you will change people's lives and help people literally just by doing that, which we tend to think of, oh, we're being selfish for caring for ourselves. Absolutely not. It's one of the most selfless things that you can do to care for yourself, because that is going to benefit everyone around you, guaranteed.
Yeah, absolutely. which is actually a perfect way to go into our next question. Any tips for managing stress as a parent during this time when there are no breaks from our children?
Very good question. And actually, at the end of this, I guess I can move this along too. At the end of this, yes, right here. I think you guys will have available these slides. So I highly recommend that you check out each one of these. I think the one that I'm thinking of that would really be helpful is the second link, 18 tips on how to cope with children on quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
But just some general kind of tips. Most important thing I think is trying your hardest. And I know it's not easy. I have two very young kids at home. It's not easy, but trying your hardest to have some sort of routine, some sort of structure. Because if it's just wake up whenever, do whatever, like whatever, it's gonna lead to stress. You know, kids and adults need to have routine. We need to have consistency. So as much as you can, just coming up with, okay, we're going to try to get up at least a range, you know, between 7 and 8 every day. We're going to do this approximately breakfast. We're going to have approximately then. Just even like writing it out. I actually write mine out for the day every day. I think my husband thinks I'm a little crazy for doing that. But yeah, I'm like, today we're having breakfast. We're here to here. We're doing this. But it's helpful. And like I said, kids really need that structure. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is related to that is you need to figure out, and however you do it, and it can be complicated, trust me, I know. But figure out when during the day are you going to have some you time. You have to figure it out. Whatever you have to do, whether it's like, you know, they have to sit in front of a movie, you know what I mean? And they get an hour of screen time, whatever, that's fine, if that's what it is. If you have to ask your husband to do this, whatever it is, figure out every day, when is your time going to be? I would say at least 30 minutes, an hour would be better, where you can shut the door, you can meditate, and you can take a bath, you can do whatever, but trying to figure at least to have a minimal amount of time of you adult time, I think can be immensely helpful. I need it. I know for sure. Like if I don't get it, it's it's rough. And I know it's hard. I know it sometimes doesn't seem practical. Like, well, how am I going to figure that out? And a part of that, like I said, is kind of figuring out, write it on the schedule too. And you know, one thing, a friend of mine actually gave me this tip, which I did try one time too, is wherever you decide to do your you time, if it's, let's say it's a room in your house or whatever, put a sign up. You can make a sign, like you can laminate it or whatever. You don't have to laminate it, but put a sign up that says like, mommy is, you know, having her me time or whatever you want to call it from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Please do not disturb unless it's an emergency. You know what I mean? Like literally just hang that on your door and then like put on your noise canceling headphones or whatever you have to do, and just have a little time to yourself. I think it really does kind of save your mental health to do that.
Mm-hmm. I saw someone online who made the sign, and they said, these are emergencies. These are not emergencies.
Yes, no, that's actually an excellent point.
Looking that out.
Yeah, losing your shoe, not an emergency. No more teeth, not an emergency. Cut off your finger, yes. That's you knock on the door.
Yeah, lay it out.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So I know way back in the beginning, you talked about how sometimes when we have the negative thoughts, that's when the emotions can follow. And one that you mentioned was guilt. And someone asked the question, are there any tips you have on reducing feelings of guilt? Guilt about what you are and aren't getting done at work, guilt about what you aren't doing well as a parent, etc.
Absolutely. So I think the first step is to recognize it, right? So again, guilt is the emotion. But you're having the guilt because there's some thought, right? So you have to kind of trace it back. First of all, so you have to say, okay, I'm feeling guilty. That's step number one. Step number two, why am I feeling guilty? Okay. And then you say, okay, it's a thought. I didn't feed my kids very healthy today, whatever. That's a thought. I am a bad mom. That's the other thought, right? And now I'm feeling guilty. I'm feeling guilty because I'm a bad mom and, you know, I didn't do whatever it is I need to do for them. That's step number one. And then step number two is kind of what we were talking about with the mindfulness, which is take a step back, right? I like to do this mental exercise. I'll kind of make it quick, but basically you take your mind and you zoom all the way out to the farthest reaches of the universe, right? and you all the way out past every star, past whatever, to the edge of the universe. And there's a telescope, and there's a person holding that telescope, and then they're focusing it all the way through the galaxy, down through Earth, down to you, and watching you. And inside your brain, there's all these molecules moving around, neurotransmitters and things like that. And those are what are comprising your thoughts, right? So what I'm trying to get at is, if you're looking at your thoughts from a million miles away through a telescope, and you're looking at them as just this combination of molecules moving around in your brain and neurotransmitters and impulses, it kind of helps you step back from it and say, you know what? Like, this is silly. Like, you know, like my having this thought about whatever, you know, feeding my kid, whatever, like that's actually kind of silly. Like it gives you some perspective and some distance from it. And then once you have that distance, what you do is the curiosity, the compassion, the acceptance, and the non-judgmental. That's where that comes in. So curiosity, that's interesting. I think that I need to be this really good mother who, you know, feeds my kids healthy foods every day. Well, I wonder why that is. I wonder where that thought came from. Maybe that's because, like, my friend, whatever, like she says that all the time. So maybe I'm kind of like internalizing her values. That's interesting. Do I really need to do that? I don't know. You know, so that's the curiosity angle. And then non-judgmental angle is, you know what? What if I can what if I can do this, but not judge it, right? Or what if I can have this thought or do this thing, but just not judge it? What if I just choose not to? Isn't that crazy? We all have the ability to do that. We don't have to judge everything that we do. We do that because we learned how to do it for years of our life. But you know what? You don't have to. You know what? You could say, you know what? I'm not going to judge that. Just like let's say I don't want to judge that person over there for wearing whatever, you know. I could take that same non-judgmental and say, you know what? I'm just going to not judge myself on that. Okay? And then the next thing is, you know, compassion, right? So you can say, you know what? I'm going to love myself. I'm going to say, you know what? I messed up. I didn't give my kid this X, Y, or Z, but you know what? I'm going to love myself anyway. You know what? And I'm going to accept myself. I'm going to accept myself. I'm going to love myself. That's what I'm going to do. And it's a choice, right? That's what the idea is. The idea is you step back from it. You kind of come at it from a curious angle. And then you realize that the choice is yours. It's not anybody else. You can choose. You can choose to let yourself feel horrible about it and judge yourself and be critical. You can choose that path, or you can choose not to, and you can choose to be non-judgmental and compassionate and accepting. And once you realize that it's a choice, then you can make that choice, right? And then you can just that thought and then subsequently that emotion just kind of evaporates, because you realize, I didn't have to choose to do it. You know, I don't have to choose to be guilty about that. That's my choice, and I'm choosing not to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that's an empowering way to wrap up this call today. That's great advice and a great tool. Awesome. Well, Dr. Campbell, I just want to thank you for being here, for talking with us about all of these topics. This has been really informative, and I think especially helpful in this time of quarantine, when maybe the negative thoughts feel a little bit more salient than they usually do. So we appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. I had fun.
And I just want to thank all of our participants for watching. Again, we're so happy that you are here. We'll be able to share Dr. Campbell's slides with you, these resources, and then any additional resources that Dr. Campbell sends our way. A couple things I just want to mention. And one thing that Dr. Campbell actually talked about when she was talking about parenting during quarantine was how important those routines are, which is perfect because our theme for this week with our talk about mental health is building healthy routines. So if you follow us on social media, Lord Fairfax YRA, you'll see a lot of posts about healthy routines in the next week. And then our next webinar will be next Tuesday, May 26th at 11 a.m. And we'll be talking with Dr. Jamie Hutton. And we'll just be, again, having a conversation about healthy routines and how to build in that self-care time and quiet time, and just how healthy routines can really help the family unit. I also wanted to mention, because we had a question about intergenerational trauma, the local coalitions are planning to do a regional read of the book Childhood Disrupted: How Your Biography Becomes Your Biology and How You Can Heal. So we'll share information about that when the time comes, when that's all set up, but that might be of interest to some of you. And then lastly, I just want to share that we have a newsletter where we share all of our events and resources that we have for community members. And Amber will send a link in the chat for the webinar next week, for the latest newsletter. And then if you want to be subscribed to the newsletter, you can send your email directly to Amber in the chat, and we'll get you added to that. The next one will go out today. So I think that's all I have to share. Again, just want to thank all of you for being here, especially thank you, Dr. Campbell, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.